What's up, nerds? My name's Abdul Nafe, and I recently got the opportunity to shoot a podcast with Patrick 4D. Patrick is an amazing 3D artist. I have been a huge fan of him for the past 3 years, and we discussed a lot of important topics like how to stay up to date with the latest trends in 3D art, how to get started with 3D art, how to improve your skills, how to be creative, how to overcome creative blocks, and we also discussed AI and Metaverse and how that is going to affect 3D artists. And finally, we also discussed the business side of art, how to sell your work, how to negotiate with clients, and how to succeed as a freelance 3D artist. So, this podcast is jam packed with very useful information and little tips. So, if you're an artist, I would highly, highly recommend you to watch this podcast to the end. And yeah, I think without any further ado, let's start the podcast. All right, Patrick. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I have been a huge fan for like 3 years now, and getting the opportunity to do this podcast with you is honestly a dream come true. So, yeah, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Absolutely. Dude, thanks for having me.
Perfect. So the majority of people watching this podcast do already know who you are, but just for the few who don't, if you could like introduce yourself. So, what type of artwork you make, when and how did you get into 3D and stuff like
Sure.
that?
So my name is Patrick Foley, or Patrick 4D, as people know me on social media or Instagram. And I'm a 3D artist based in Atlanta, Georgia. I do predominantly digital ad work in 3D, I would say. I still don't exactly know what to tell people because I feel like it's very unique. But usually I just show people my Instagram. And I went to school for film and television here in Atlanta at SCAD. And that kind of paved the way for me to eventually dive into 3D just on my own time as a hobby. And I've been able to get everything from like character work, worked with companies like Cartoon Network and Adult Swim, and that moved on to more cartoon food related work that I was making on Instagram. It eventually got more into just the food, got really into kind of making food on the daily on social media. And so I found that I had a knack for making food not only look commercially ready, but real edible as well and photorealistic. So I've been having fun with that. Originally, I went to school for film and television, and kind of midway through college, got into this 3D thing as a hobby. And by the time I graduated, I was kind of doing 50-50 3D work and film work. And when I found out that I was doing a lot less physically demanding work for more money, I just like kind of gave up the film stuff altogether. But I went to school for film, and before 3D, I was a director of photography. So I was like wielding the camera, setting up the shots, lighting the scenes. So by the time I got into the 3D world, I was kind of I had a position and knew how to light stuff using camera settings and a lot of the stuff that you do in the real world just in a 3D environment.
Got it. So, like the main attraction factor for coming to 3D was the fact that you had to do less physical work, right?
Yeah, I think it was that. One, I really liked just the ability to make these things. When I first saw that you could, just one person could make these things that looked so grand, um, and photorealistic, but also had like an abstract sense to it. I think when I originally got into 3D, I was really drawn to like Beeple's work and Hood Ass because these things were like impossible and abstract, but they looked photorealistic. And I was like, damn, this stuff, I don't know how these people are doing this, but I need to get into this. So when I started, I was doing a lot of abstract work because I didn't know how to model or anything, but I could at least light and texture for the most part. And so that's kind of how I started.
Right. That's great, man. So how does the Patrick 4D day look like? Like, what time do you wake up? What's your work schedule? How much do you work? And most importantly, how do you manage to stay so productive? Because a lot of artists, the main problem with a lot of artists is the fact that they struggle to stay productive. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, totally. So the day starts off pretty similar every single day. I get up usually around 6:30 a.m. Um, sometimes 6, sometimes a little bit earlier. But typically I get up, immediately hit the shower, start the computers, get everything on and running. And after I shower, I go down to the coffee spot that I go to, which is pretty much attached to my building, so it's pretty close. But I make it a point to leave my place every single morning and not make my coffee here. I have to go out and buy my coffee because since I work from home, it's kind of like me leaving. And then by the time I walk back, I get a little bit of a caffeine buzz and I'm kind of in the work mode. So it's like I'm re-entering the workspace. It's kind of like a mental thing. And
Right.
then immediately after that, I start the streams on Discord where shout out the Discord gang. But I hop on Discord. I got the people usually waiting for the live streams, and then we'll make whatever the daily is on the spot. So I have no idea what I'm gonna make. It's usually at this stage just a branded food element. That's like today we did a cookie sandwich or a Chipwich branded sandwich, and we kind of make it from scratch, do everything there, and then after that I usually hop off Discord for a little bit, make the reel and TikTok, post the kind of process video for it, and then that's my daily kind of scenario where I'll make something from start to finish. And it's all about the small W's. I feel like that's how you stay motivated. So I start my day kind of completing a full project before I even get to client work. And so by the time I hit the client work, I'm like already in the mode. We've done something, we feel productive. And then we just keep riding the wave throughout the day. But typically, I mean, the day starts off doing that. And then maybe the streams take about an hour, maybe 2 hours sometimes. And then immediately hit up lunch after I post it. Then maybe do a couple more hours of client work, hit the gym, come back, and that's pretty much the work day is not that crazy. It's pretty. I tend to work fast, and that's pretty much it.
That's great, man. That's a pretty productive day. And it's honestly a dream for a lot of these, a lot of new artists. And yeah, for everybody who's watching, a huge shout out to Patrick 4D's Discord server. If you guys want to join it, you guys can check the link in the description, and you'll find it. Right. So the next thing which I want to cover is 3D is an ever evolving field, right? Every day new technologies are coming out, new softwares are coming out, and previous ones are being outdated. So how do you stay up to date with like the latest trends in 3D? Do you watch tutorials a lot, or do you just figure out things as you go? So
I
how do you
think
deal
back
with
in the
that?
day when I was starting off as a 3D artist, I was watching a tutorial every single day, at least once a day, and I'd be doing. Obviously, I'd make the daily, so I'd spend at least 3-4 hours doing work right off the bat. And now that I'm actually thinking about it, talking about it, I haven't really watched a tutorial or been in that kind of like routine of it in kind of a while. But I used to remember always being like, be one tutorial a day at least, if not more, to get like that knowledge up. And once I got to a point, there was a time, I don't know when it was, but there was a time in each software where you hit a point of fluency, kind of like a language, that it's like instead of looking up, oh, how do I make this? You just see things and you're like, oh, this is how you'd make it. So you just kind of understand, even if you've never made anything before. Like every day I'm making a new food product or a new sculpt. And even though maybe I've never made that product before, it's like, okay, oh yeah, you do this. Oh, you clone these things on the surface. You'd inflate here, mask, polygroup over there. It's like you just get so fluent with these programs that you're using every day that at this point I don't really have to rely too much on tutorials or anything like that. You kind of get it, unless I'm just learning a straight up new program.
Right.
But
So you just
as far as
basically,
staying up to date,
right. So you basically do know the basics and all the stuff that you need to sort of make art in your specific software, right?
yeah, yeah, and by no means do I know, like, ZBrush is one of those programs that's so dense, and there's portions of ZBrush that I haven't even touched. So I think it's really just, I feel like 85 to 95% of the time you have to get the basics of a few different brushes, how to inflate, how to do this, how to do that, and you can kind of finesse everything else once you get those basic steps.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I basically make tutorials, right? So a lot of beginners, when I sort of teach them, they are confused. They're intimidated by 3D softwares because of the fact that it has a lot of buttons and there are a lot of things you can do. But what I usually tell them is 90% of the stuff that you see here, you're not even going to touch. So I think that makes, thinking about it that way makes 3D softwares generally very less intimidating, I think. Yeah, so that's 100%.
100%.
On
Totally
that
agree.
note, right? So on that note, what advice would you like to give to an 18-year-old or 19-year-old who's trying to start 3D art? And more importantly, what advice would you give to the 18 or 19-year-old Patrick Foley? So what things should you focus on? What things should you avoid? And stuff like that.
That's a tough one. I think for the first question, I would say because 3D can be such an intimidating and daunting thing in and of itself, to really break it off into chunks. Like I was very careful not to get into right off the bat sculpting like these really crazy characters, and that's where I think people lose interest much faster and get burnt out, because I'm even still to this day I'm in a lot of these like 3D groups, whether it's on Facebook or I look at stuff on ArtStation, anywhere where you can post work and get critiqued. I see people like first day on ZBrush and they're trying to make fully sculpted characters and like add all the wrinkles and like they're not taking their time with like the basic shapes and everything. And so it depends on what area of 3D you want to go into, but um I think it's just like start if you want to work on characters, like start off with a really simple character, like a really simple cartoon character, where it's like Powerpuff Girls. It's like a few primitives, and it's like get those basics down, and then you keep building off instead of trying to start with like the craziest outcome from the get. Because I think it's easy to get stumbled early on, and you don't know all the steps that it takes to get to the last step. So people are adding wrinkles and stuff before they're done with the basic shapes, and it can get really hard. So my version of that was when I started 3D, again, starting abstract, because it's kind of hard to be wrong when you're doing abstract work. You're just making like different primitives, you're cloning it, and as long as it looks trippy or whatever, you're right. And so I focused my time on lighting and texturing before getting to the main like modeling or sculpting or anything like that. But my advice to my past self, it's hard to say because sometimes I like saying, "Oh, I wish I started 3D like before film," or like, "I wish I started 3D way back in the day." But the truth is, if I didn't have any of the film knowledge or go to school for film or have photography knowledge, I wouldn't know how to like compose shots. I wouldn't know why like a massive softbox coming from the left creates like softer shadows and it's more appealing to the eye in some cases, or how to project certain moods. Um, so I think it all, I hate to say it, but I feel like everything kind of landed like super perfectly just by chance. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'd give myself like crypto advice, like, oh, get a ton of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, we all want to give ourselves some crypto advice, don't we? Anyways, on that note, about art school and about film school, do you recommend people to go to film school or art school in order to learn like these softwares and stuff like that? Or do you think self-learning using platforms like YouTube and Skillshare is that enough?
Right. Well, I think I'm in a very unique case because I never took a 3D class, never went to school for 3D. My schooling was in film and television, and I think for all school, but mostly in art school, where you're doing kind of things like that. It's if you're just going just to get good grades and pass, I think it's not worth it. There's so much. I learned all my 3D knowledge pretty much on YouTube and different platforms like that to the point where I could get off the training wheels and kind of dive in myself. But 90% of that was kind of like the drive I had within myself, and I wouldn't have even found 3D in the first place if I didn't go to art school, just because they had the programs. Um, so if I were to just go to school for film and just get good grades and graduate there, I wouldn't have even stumbled on 3D. So I think that the short answer is it's worth it if you're the kind of person that's going to take advantage of everything outside of class, meet all these different people, hang out with people in different majors, because you're just going to, I mean, not only will you be more engulfed in different majors and softwares and stuff like that, but you're going to meet people that you might want to hire or that might hire you later on in life.
Right, makes sense. Yeah, so if you can basically take advantage of college and the extra opportunities that it provides, for example, building connections and stuff like that, if you can take advantage of that, then you should go to college. Otherwise, just learning the technical side of softwares, I think you can do that online. Is that correct?
100% agree. Yeah.
All right, so now I'm going to take the conversation into a slightly different direction. You yourself, I think, are a pretty creative person. So how do you manage that? How do you stay creative, and how do you build creativity? This is for beginner artists who think that they're not that creative. So how do you think they should build that skill?
I think to build creativity, you got to start with a ton of inspiration, obviously, first. Um, and that's kind of what I did. I think the best thing you can do is just try so many different styles until you find your niche, and then you kind of go deep into that niche and become the best. So, like at the beginning, I think a lot of people start off obviously in the abstract realm, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think you're just in a bigger pool of people. The only thing you know how to do is create a few primitives and deform shapes when you first start out in 3D, and maybe place a couple lights, add an HDRI, and then you get into like maybe the I think Beeple was one of the first people that did like the massive landscapes, and it's a cool he was such a like transformative artist because he was able to take like the initial concepts of taking like really simple primitives and just putting them in like a massive environment and kind of using the best of both worlds. It's like this really complex nature of environment creating, but also using some of the fundamental basics of 3D in the first place, like spheres, cubes, and just like really tripping them out. So I think the short answer there would be just like keep pushing yourself, try different styles. If you've done landscapes for a while, try characters. Even if you don't think you'll like it, there's stuff that you'll learn and find interesting. And once you're done with that, try maybe hard surface modeling and just like keep pushing the boundaries to what you kind of create. Because even I've gotten to a place where I thought, damn, I feel like I've plateaued a little bit, and then you start. That's part of the reason why originally I was doing like product stuff. Then I was like, oh, let me try characters. All right, let me try character food, and then it moved into like actual foods because I'm like, oh, if I can do like cartoon foods and bring those to life, then maybe I can make realistic foods in general. So everything just builds off. You should always keep pushing yourself, pushing the limits, and if you're not pushing yourself, what's the point?
Right. Perfect. Speaking of creativity, do you like face creative blocks? And if you do, how do you deal with them?
I think I've put myself into a position where I don't have to worry as much about you know putting myself into a bind every single day. Meaning, my version of looking for inspiration is literally every morning. All right, let's think of a new cool food that I haven't heard of or that I have heard of that I haven't made yet. So there's always instead of just like, all right, what's this abstract piece that's never been thought of before and that like I'm trying to come up from scratch. Um, it's like I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, where's at the very basics of it? I'm looking for a different type of food maybe that I haven't made before, and then I'm taking those concepts. How can I make that my own? How can I make them kind of floating in a cool little still life? And so by the end of it, I have something that's very me, but I took a lot of inspiration from things that have already been made, like cheeseburgers, chicken sandwiches, different brands, and then all that together kind of leads to different client work.
Right. Perfect. So I think you've essentially just made the process of creativity easier by simplifying your workflow and using a lot of inspiration. So I think, yeah, I think that's a very good tip. Different
Sure.
areas. Right. Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of people, what are your thoughts on NFTs? Do you think NFTs are good for artists, or do you think they harm artists in any way?
I think NFTs are no different um, than art in the real world at its most basic form. It's like if you're willing to spend money to support an artist, buy their artworks in a picture frame. I think the misconception is that like, oh, but it's actually legit, it's real. It's like, it's tangible, so that makes it real in NFTs. I don't even know if many people are like arguing that anymore. I think it's more the NFTs got a really bad rep because everyone was making when the gold rush of NFTs started, everyone started making projects who weren't even in the 3D community. People were trying to like day trade these things. And so it got really real artistry and real artists got overshadowed by people just trying to make money overnight. And so I think that's where NFTs kind of took a turn for the worse. But I think that was just inevitable. I think now after it sank for a bit, it's starting to, I feel like, come up to a point where the people who are there now are there to stay. And I still think it's like a good medium for supporting a digital artist's work. It's like if you're a painter, it makes sense that it would be in the physical world. But as a 3D artist, the end product is never a physical piece. It's always a digital piece. So it would make sense if you want to support an artist, if you want to own something one of one, NFTs is just the logical explanation for owning, supporting, and even selling an artist's work later on.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why NFTs collapsed was the fact that a lot of these NFTs were AI generated. So the supply of these NFTs was really high because the effort in creating NFTs was so low. And so I think eventually the demand faded, and I think the collapse happened because of that. Speaking of AI generated art, what are your thoughts on AI generated art? So to give the viewers some context, Stable Diffusion is basically a new technology which sort of generates art based on previous what do you call it, like previous artwork created by other people. So it can basically generate masterpieces in like a few clicks. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think they're gonna pose a threat to traditional artists' job in the next maybe 5, 10 years?
I think AI in and of itself is a good thing. Like I feel like every artist uses AI to a certain degree. In small cases like, AI masking, AI denoising, stuff that we've used for a while now. It's only until this like the mid journey and the generative stuff that just creates stuff within seconds that look like masterpieces has really, I think, scared certain people. But I don't think real artistry is ever gonna like fade or die away. I think um the clients or the people that we think are going to choose that over real artistry will use it, and so the others, I think, will still have to rely on artists because I think at least a lot of the clientele I'm working with, there's no way that the amount of strategic changes and revisions that need to be made are possible with AI yet. Who knows in the future? I know it's growing really fast, but I can't see a realistic client being happy with the vague amount of changes you're able to make to them currently. But as far as just general AI, yeah, I'm not. I think it's really good for certain cases, like look development maybe, and then okay, I got an idea for like this environment, and then you just recreate it in 3D. Uh, I don't know how I feel about people just straight up creating stuff from the prompt and then just posting that work and saying that it's like they're artists, because at that point I feel like you're not really doing anything. I mean, you could call yourself like a poet maybe because you're like typing in words. But yeah, it gets dicey. I don't know. I don't even think we really know fully the capabilities or where it's going to take anyone. So I'm kind of just sitting back on the sidelines and watching how it unfolds. I don't really have like a crazy opinion on it
Yeah, I
yet.
think the future is going to be pretty interesting. I personally am pretty excited to see what AI can do for us in the next few years. And yeah, I'm pretty excited for the future. So going on to a tangent from AI generated art, what do you think of the metaverse and VR spaces, which Meta is promoting nowadays? What do you think of them? How are they going to affect artists? And do you think that that impact is going to be positive or negative?
Right. Well, uh I did some work for Meta back in the day, just for like their platform. But yeah, didn't they just? I don't know if you're caught up on this, but I thought I just heard that Meta is rolling back on NFTs on like Instagram and
Yeah,
platforms
yeah.
like that.
So a lot of platforms are taking back NFTs, but generally, a lot of companies are also investing a lot of money in VR and creating virtual environments and stuff like that,
Mm,
right? Obviously, Facebook, Meta actually has reduced their investments currently because of the stock price crash and stuff like that. However, they still are
yeah,
investing some. Yeah.
gotcha. I see like potential for just like more jobs and more VR ready assets to be created. I guess the only difference would be like you got to watch your poly count and stuff, but yeah, I don't think that's like a threat or anything to artists. I feel like if anything, it's like if they're trying to make the 3D environment and the 3D metaverse as a whole more of like a mainstream thing. So I feel like that can only be good.
Right. Yeah. So you're optimistic about the future. That's perfect. So we're at the 25
Yeah.
minute mark currently, and I would like to take this conversation into the business side of art and how to sell stuff, how to price your work, how to negotiate, how to market it, stuff like that. So what would be your
Mhm.
advice for beginner artists, beginner freelancers who are trying to get into this space? What would you suggest them, how to price your work, how to negotiate with clients and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's always a tricky one when people ask because every artist has their own price, their own value, how they see or how they value their own work, and it's all about just uh, convincing and showing clients or prospective clients that your work is worth it. And I guess in my world, that has to do with the demand coming in. So like a lot of clientele coming in through like email and the website and also social media following. Um, as weird as that sounds, like it all plays a role. So uh, I think when you're pricing stuff, first you have to have a good portfolio. You have to show people that your work is worth it. And then the way I did it was just test the market. Like, obviously I wasn't charging what I'm charging now. Years ago, I remember my first thing. I was like, "Oh, dude, I'll make this little album cover for you for like $50 or $100," and I was so happy to make even that money doing anything 3D related. And eventually, you keep pushing up. At least the way I did it was, you keep raising the bar until you finally get some flack on it, and you're like, okay, so this seems to be where people are comfortable. And then you test the market more with different clients, and eventually you get to a place where uh, you've done that so many times that you kind of get into a rhythm, and then obviously you mix that with the leverage you have, which is how many clients you have coming in, and between those two things, you can start raising your prices if you got so much work coming in that you can't take it all. It's just supply and demand. So that's kind of how I did it. I never really like researched any other pricing structure or anything like that. It was always just, let's see how far I can push the bar. Let's see how much work I have coming in, social following, everything like that. And then just how skilled do you think you are in the industry? So all things considered, there's no like, when you're beginning, you gotta charge this, and then you charge this. I think it's like a rite of passage. Everybody has their own journey to the whole pricing structure thing.
Right. Yeah, perfect. That makes total sense. So in a previous podcast, you mentioned that you rely on Instagram for a good chunk of your revenue, and you even mentioned that posting on Instagram was like buying lottery tickets because you never know when you're gonna go viral, and you never know when your page is gonna blow up. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think of other platforms like maybe YouTube, for example? Because when I opened your channel, the last video you uploaded was like 4 years ago. So what do you think of YouTube? Do you think maybe features like YouTube Shorts, are they not effective enough?
I think they can be. I think the problem with the short form content, which is like the TikToks and YouTube Shorts, is that I think it's a false sense of like engagement, meaning you can have something go super viral on TikTok and those platforms and get a ton of followers, get a ton of likes, but still nobody will know who you are because, and it makes sense too because, uh, if you're scrolling on TikTok and you're like, oh, this looks sweet, the follow button's right there, follow, swipe. They don't know who you are, they don't know anything, and it's like I feel like this is the only time in history where you can have like a massive following but not be able to sell merch. You can't sell at arenas. And I've even heard of this. I saw um, some other podcasts where I believe it was Mr. Beast Manager where he was talking about that. I forgot his name, but it was just the concept of this like the short form content is like really misleading in building audiences. So YouTube tutorials, YouTube in general, I feel like that's really good because you're making people have to sit through like longer content. They get to know you more. They get to know who you are, and I feel like the brand loyalty just skyrockets from there. But the TikTok, it's like people can have so many followers, so many likes, and still it's like you don't really have like a true fan base. They're just like stats. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I should be posting more on like YouTube Shorts, all that stuff. That just comes from like neglect. Not that I'm like against any of those platforms really.
Right. That was a very interesting take and a pretty unique one because honestly, I agree with that because when people, let's say, see some of your work on, let's say, maybe Instagram Reels, they only see that specific piece of artwork or that specific piece of work and they follow based on that. So I think in a lot of cases that can be pretty misleading. Yeah.
Look at anytime you're on TikTok or like YouTube Shorts or anything like that, or even Facebook Reels, it's like all these videos that I see with millions of views and like shares and all that stuff. It's like these are just regular people chilling outside their house. They're not even influencers. They're just like people that have like these one-off videos that went super viral. And it's like nobody knows who these people are. It's just the algorithm chose them because their content was very engaging. But like it's very misleading. It's like these people aren't like, Kanye West or any of these big public figures that everyone knows, Kim Kardashian. These are just like one-off things.
Right. So I think the last question of this podcast should be how to leverage your audience because you have a pretty big audience on Instagram mainly. And so have you been able to like leverage that audience to like generate some revenue? You do have your own asset store. Shout out to p4d.store. So how effective do you think you have been in sort of leveraging your audience to generate revenue.
Right. Yeah, that's why I think Instagram is, and just any social media platform for the most part, if you can build a true audience, it's super important because that kind of stuff translates and trickles down to so many other endeavors that you decide to do. That's why I started releasing those asset packs on like p4d.store and different stuff like that. The revenue from that pretty much is directly correlated at this point to how much work I'm putting in towards running it. And so in the seasons where I'm making a lot more content and packs, they do pretty well. But when I'm much more busy with client work currently, then it can be neglected a little bit. But it's been good. You can't go wrong with like diversifying. I feel like that's one of the main things of being a freelancer these days is diversifying your income, whether that's, making classes. I have some stuff on Skillshare, making the assets, and then obviously client work and stuff like that. So even just those three, I feel like are a lot. Back like when I was still in school, I had a decent backbone. When I was doing a lot more teaching on Skillshare, that was a much bigger backbone of income before I started getting tons of client work. And I think it just that's why I was able to make so many more. What do you call it? I think that's why I was able to make like more courageous decisions back earlier on in my career because I had those backbones of income, and that's why I made certain life decisions like moving to different places, investing more money in equipment, and things may have not have been the same way if I didn't diversify, income back in the day from the ground up.
Right, Patrick. I think we're at the end of the podcast. Do you have anything to say to the audience? Just anything.
Nah, man. I appreciate you having me. I think if you are looking to get into 3D, feel free to join the Discord. We're always on there. I feel like it's super easy to catch me on there. I'm there every day, every morning. The chats are open when we're streaming, so feel free to ask any questions.
Perfect.
And appreciate
also,
you having me on here, man.
Also, yeah, the assets are pretty amazing, guys. Check them out. In the link will be in the description. Also, the Skillshare classes of Patrick are pretty good as well, so you can check them out as well. The link again will be in the description. And yeah, Patrick, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. And yeah, as I mentioned previously, this podcast was a huge flex for me. Yeah, thanks for doing this, man.
Thanks for having me, bro. Hell yeah, anytime.
All right, bro. See you. All right, thank you so much for watching this podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it and I really hope you learned something new. If you're new to this channel, give this channel a subscribe and be sure to like this video. And also tell me what was your favorite part of the podcast in the comments down below. And also feel free to support me on Patreon. Apart from that, yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.